Okay, I wanted to go back to, this is actually slide 49, because when I was explaining the terms twitch and summation and incomplete and complete tetanus, it was more like I gave you definitions, but honestly, I'm not sure those definitions are that easy to understand. So I actually asked my colleague, Mr. Adams. He's another. He's actually the primary anatomy and physiology instructor, and I figured he would know like how to explain this to you a little bit better than just reading the definitions. So if you're relating this to something like doing a bicep curl, you know, or just picking up a glass off of a table to drink, just that motion, you know, you have to do a bicep curl to do that. So contracting your bicep, shortening your bicep, whatever you want to call it. The twitch, which these would be individual twitches, and summation is just the adding up or the summation of those twitches. So this graph shows you these individual twitches. So a twitch, the best that I can relate it to is like if you were to have a single muscle spasm in your bicep, but the way he explained it to me is like even less than that. Like it would be a muscle spasm that you wouldn't even notice. So summation of those tiny, tiny muscle spasms occurs, and then you have incomplete tetanus, which would be like your bicep muscle might be a little bit shaky because there's brief periods of relaxation between the contractions. But what we really notice in our everyday life is complete tetanus. So it's really hard to give you a good example of incomplete tetanus or just individual twitches, because when we do an action, our muscle goes into complete tetanus. I mean, it's because the action requires our muscles to do that, to go into complete tetanus, completely contract so that we can do the job that we want to do, like lift the glass up off the table or, curl a dumbbell, whatever action that we want our muscles to do. So these would really be kind of not noticeable things that we could notice, but the complete tetanus would be the actual muscle doing the job that we're, our skeletal muscles are voluntary, so we have to consciously decide to pick the glass up. Somewhere in our nervous system, we have to tell our muscle to do that, that job. So when we do those kinds of things, when we do things with our muscles are in complete tetanus at that point. Okay, so I hope that helps a little bit. It helped me. His explanation helped me anyway. Now I'm going to move on to slide number 71. 72, sorry. So muscle performance is measured in force and endurance. So, of course, the force is the amount of tension you produce, and the endurance is how long you can do that activity. We know endurance activities would be like running and swimming and biking, and force activities that are more about force would be just weightlifting, So there are two factors that determine performance. There are the types of fibers in the muscle, which we're getting ready to learn about, fast twitch fibers and slow twitch fibers. And actually most of our muscle is a mixture of those fibers, but we're just going to learn what fast twitch and slow twitch fibers are and what they're used for. And also, the other factor that determines performance is physical conditioning or training, because we do train our muscles to do certain things. So let's talk about the fast muscle fibers first. They're going to reach peak tension very quickly. The majority of the muscle fibers in our body are fast fibers. They have a large diameter, large glycogen reserves, meaning that glycogen can be broken down to glucose and then used to generate ATP. There's relatively few mitochondria in these fast fibers, so they rely on glycolysis, so that means they fatigue rapidly. because they produce lactic acid, the pH lowers, and the muscle fatigues. They don't have enough ATP, and they make lactic acid. Those two things together, that means they're going to fatigue rapidly. The myofibrils are densely packed, so the contractions are powerful. Think about your quadriceps, muscles of your legs, when you do a squat, especially if you do a squat with a weight in your hands, those are powerful muscles. Then we have slow skeletal muscle fibers, and these are about half the diameter of fast fibers, so they're skinnier. They are 3 times slower than fast fibers. They take 3 times as long to reach peak tension, but they're specialized to contract using aerobic respiration, and that means they're going to have more ATP available to them, and they have more mitochondria as well. So they're fatigue resistant because they have a greater oxygen supply. They have more capillaries, more blood supplying them, so more oxygen supply to the muscle itself. They have high levels of oxygen storage through myoglobin. And the oxygen use is efficient because there's a lot of mitochondria. So they're carrying out aerobic respiration and there's a lot more ATP being produced per, glucose or fatty acid that's being broken down. A lot more ATP available. Okay, so how does this relate to the chicken that we eat? When we eat light meat chicken, when we eat like the chicken breast, that's going to be dominated by fast fibers and appear pale. So our chicken breast would be white muscles, which are going to be fast fibers. Okay. But when we eat the dark meat, then a lot of that is slow fibers. And they appear red because they're dominated by slow fibers and they have extensive blood supply and myoglobin, so that causes the red color. Now in humans, not chicken, but humans, the muscle tissue tends to be pink because there's like a combination of the fast and slow fibers, white and red fibers. But in chicken, you can see a bigger difference in the dark meat and the light meat of the chicken. The dark meat would be slow fibers and the light meat would be fast fibers. So the more powerful muscles of the breast are going to be the white meat of the chicken. Okay, checkpoint question. Which type of muscle fibers would you expect to dominate in the large leg muscles of someone who excels at endurance activities such as cycling or long distance running? And that is going to be the slow fibers, which is the red fibers. Slow/red fibers. Okay, there's some section here on cardiac versus smooth muscle tissue or muscle cells that I'm going to skip because we have to skip something. But I do want to go over the major, superficial muscles anyway, of the human body, anterior and posterior view. I want to go over them with you because sometimes I think it helps you to hear the names pronounced. So we're going to start with the muscles that are listed here over on the left side of the page, the axial muscles, which would be of the head and the trunk, basically. So we have the temporalis muscle, which lies alongside the temporal bone, the frontalis muscle, which lies alongside the frontal bone. And remember what I told you, the frontalis is connected to the occipitalis in the back of the head by this aponeurosis, this white sheet called an aponeurosis. Then we have my absolute favorite muscle. I don't know why, I just like the name. It's called the sternocleidomastoid. It has a connection to the sternum. That's the sterno part. It connects to the clavicle bone. See here? That's the cleido part. And then it connects to the the mastoid process, which is like down below the ear on your head. I don't think I went over that in chapter 6, but that's okay. It connects a little bit below your ear and then to the breastbone and then to the clavicle, the collarbone. So this is the sternocleidomastoid. And then for the abdominal muscles, we have the six-pack muscles called the rectus abdominis And then we have the external obliques, and those you work out when you do like the side, the twisted sit-ups where you do like a side sit-up. Instead of coming straight up, you kind of cross over to one side, and that works your external obliques. And then you have the connective tissue that connects in the center of the rectus abdominis muscles. It's called the linea alba. Literally means white line. All right, on the right arm, even though this is the left side of the page, it's the right arm, there is a band called the flexor retinaculum. And then there is a band of connective tissue here called the iliotibial tract along the lateral side of your thigh. Here's the patella or knee bone and the tibia or shin bone. So I mostly just want you to know the muscles, but I'm telling you these other landmarks just so you know what they are. All right, so the muscle that most of it you see on the posterior view, but this little bit you see is the trapezius or the traps. You know, when you do your shoulder shrugs, that's going to work those trapezius muscles. You can see the clavicle bone and you can see the sternum here. The deltoid is your shoulder muscle that allows for the movement of abduction, moving your arm away, or lateral raises if you do work out, you know. All right, then you have your chest muscles, which are the pecs or pectoralis major. There's also a set called pectoralis minor. The latissimus dorsi is just this little bit of muscle tissue that you can see on the anterior view, but we'll see a lot of it, the majority of that muscle is on your back side on the posterior view. You have the serratus anterior muscles here, and they're serrated like a serrated knife. You have the biceps brachii, and then behind those you can see portions of the triceps brachii. The brachialis muscle and the pronator teres, which allows you to pronate. The brachioradialis, which causes the bulge in your forearm. Extensor carpi radialis, the palmaris longus, the flexor carpi radialis, the flexor digitorum superficialis, the flexor carpi ulnaris. So any of these that are called flexors, they allow you to flex at the wrist or flex your fingers. And then the ones called extensors allow you to extend into the anatomical position again. All right, gluteus medius, you can see a little bit on the anterior view. This muscle is called the tensor fascia latae. This is the iliopsoas. This is the pectineus. Adductor longus, which allows you, when your leg is out to the side, it allows you to bring it back in. Adductor, adduction. Then we have the gracilis, which is on the medial side of the thigh. The sartorius, which crosses over from the lateral to the medial side of the thigh. The rectus femoris, which is one of your quadriceps muscles. The vastus lateralis here, the vastus medialis here, and then I want to tell you the one that's kind of deep to the rectus femoris is called the vastus intermedius. Those four muscles make up your quadriceps muscles. So this group of muscles here makes up your quadriceps, and that's in the notes in a minute. Gastrocnemius is the calf muscle, which you can kind of see on the anterior side, but the largest portion will be around on the posterior side. You have the fibularis longus, tibialis anterior, the soleus, which works together with the gastrocnemius to allow you to stand on your tiptoes. The extensor digitorum longus, that allows you to extend your digits or point your toes. Now let's look at the posterior view. So the occipitalis here on the posterior side of your head, connected by the aponeurosis, epicranial aponeurosis is the total name for it. You can see a little bit of the sternocleidomastoid, a little bit of the external obliques. But let's come over to the right side and go over these terms. The trapezius, you can see in the upper back, it extends down along along your neck to your shoulder and then down the middle of your upper back. Trapezius, and that's one that you work when you do shoulder shrugs. The deltoid, you can see that on the posterior side. The infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the teres major. Then the rhomboid major, the triceps brachii, latissimus dorsi. So that's latissimus refers to a wide muscle, and dorsi refers to back. It covers the majority of your back, very large back muscle. We have the brachioradialis. You can see a little bit of it. The extensor carpi radialis, the flexor carpi ulnaris, extensor digitorum, allows you to extend your digits or your fingers. The extensor carpi ulnaris allows extension at the wrist. And the gluteus medius, gluteus maximus, tensor, fascia latae, adductor magnus. And then we have the muscles of the hamstrings, the semitendinosus on the medial side. The semimembranosus is even more medial. I meant medial to this one, which is the biceps femoris. So we have biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and then this one is the semimembranosus. Then you can see the gracilis a little bit better on the medial side of the thigh. The sartorius, the plantaris, the gastrocnemius, and then the soleus.